I don't think that what I offer in my work, as a mainstream overview, would ever be considered a release or relief. However, I think to the people that identify with my work, what I want to be is I want to be a voice of articulation which summarizes all the frustrations that a minority of people share, a sexual minority, a political minority, an intellectual minority of people that understand that or have been born into what they feel is a state of victimhood just by being alive in this century under the fascism of the nuclear family, under the fascism of poverty, over the fascism of the corporate war whores who are killing the planet and as many people in it as possible. When I decided to make the films with Richard Kern, I mean, I had already been doing music and I'd already started doing spoken word. And I mean, the words were what was important. The words are why I did music in the first place, was to get the words across. That led to spoken word, divorced of any music. And then the next step was to find a way to explore and explain my own personal traumas and my own obsessions, and to find a way to not be to further victimize myself. I think any obsession is fantastic if it's not controlling you. I think that all obsessions are allowed. Every fetish is accepted if you could find someone to consensually realize these things with you. But when you are behaving in a reactionary manner and you're on a cycle which was started in abuse and trauma, and you're carrying that on as your own self-flagellator, well, that's the point, to step off the wheel. And making these films was part of my own public psychotherapy. So in making The Right Side of My Brain and Fingered, which people found very shocking because it's not as if I was, they might have thought I was an icon. I was just creating out of my own trauma. Didn't then and don't now consider myself an icon, a rock star, a musician. I think I'm a journalist. That's how I view myself. People were shocked because it wasn't fiction. Or maybe it was fiction, they didn't know. But it's not fiction. These are based on my real experiences. And many people ask, how could you show that? How could I show what? Like, my trauma or my obsessions are not that unique. They're completely universal. And many people share them, men and women. Men are socialized to turn their violence outward. Women are socialized to zip it up, be quiet, smile, act nice, don't be violent. That's socialization. Turn it inward. I mean, society sets up so many stumbling blocks for women to hate themselves by the images they present, always perfect, always manufactured, always silicone enhanced, always blonde, beautiful and thin, etc., that are so unrealistic that at every turn a woman is presented with an unrealistic image which she will never live up to, thus furthering her own self-dissatisfaction, first of all. I think that it's just natural for men via sports as backyard war games, be tough, act like a man, to turn their violence outward. And I think women can use prostitution as a way to further hurt themselves. Unlike the rare occasion like an Eileen Warnos that just does get so fed up she can't take it anymore. I think it's really just socialization. I'm so much of a fucking man. And I think it's just a trick that I'm encased in this body. But and I say that sarcastically because I think, this whole gender divide, I think that if we weren't socialized the way we were as children, if we were taught more to embrace all of our emotions and not segregated as children into an emotional patterning, if we were learned to embrace all sides, and if, again, going back to Mary Daly and going back to the origins of words, I mean, we divide some words by the genders we assume they represent, which I think is a crock of shit. I think that for me, because I'm so in touch with my male side, whatever that means, does that mean macho, does that mean tough, does that mean blunt, does that mean take no bullshit? I guess, but I think those are very female qualities too. I think if we go back to the origins of what feminine really meant, if we go back to Kali, then we realize that the Great Mother is both compassionate and a killer. Basically a compassionate killer. A nurturer, yet someone who's going to keep your ass in line. So I think that for me it's different because I just always knew, I always instinctively turned it outwards. I think it's very important for people to talk about their addictions, their traumas, overcoming them or not overcoming them, or whatever place in their own personal history or hysteria they are that makes it urgent for them to document it at that moment. I think that we certainly still need more discussion about every kind of trauma and what it does to the individual and what it leads to. I mean, and that's one of the reasons I still feel urgent to create and talk about the same themes I've always talked about, is because we need more discussion about this and about what it does to us. And more different viewpoints. And I think that's why it's so important for people like J.T. Leroy to write and be translated, and Dorothy Allison. And, you know, I just don't think we've explored the topic enough, because basically early childhood trauma, whether it's from poverty or religion or bullyism or the parents or relatives, I mean, it leaves such an indelible scar on people. And it's so difficult when you're so vulnerable and fragile and unformed, and you're battered by something so much bigger than you. Because even an unbattered child, we're going to be battered by the reality that the world is forcing down our face every minute. So if you couple that with you know, the brutalizing of just innocence, to regain innocence back, or to regain love of life back, to regain passion back in a way that's life affirming, without without denying you your extremism, which could be a very positive thing. I mean, often it's the traumatized people that they're going for extremes because they've deadened themselves so much in order to blunt down the pain. And this is something I've talked about, and this is something I strove at for many decades to get over, is I don't want to be numb. I don't want to be, of course I'm angry at many things in the world, but I don't want to be angry in my everyday life due to something that was done to me 40 years ago. I want to be proactive.
You said sometimes that you nearly thanked your father because he had you, he forced you to come back.
I think it's very healthy to, of course, know who the enemy is and to hate the enemy directly, because I think that many people that have been brutalized or traumatized, they end up hating themselves, which I never hated myself. I always hated everybody else. But that wasn't the right enemy either. The right enemy, I think it's very healthy for people to hate the direct enemy. And once you hate them with every fiber in your being and you're killing them night after night in your dreams, you can then get over that hatred and try to better understand what drove the person to torture you, what turns someone into an abuser. You have to understand how it's not as if this just the same with domestic violence. It's not as if a man wakes up deciding, I'm going to beat my wife today. First of all, there's a dynamic. There's a roller coaster of emotion. There's a magnetism, but there's generational abuse, which I think until we understand that, and that's why for me, for instance, the chain stops here of abuse, or I find a creative outlet. So if I'm going to use my audience as the whipping boy, it's only so we can all go through the battery and come out the other side of it with some kind of positive negativism. I think it's very healthy to know who the real enemy is or are, hate them immensely, but then understand them, and understand also how much of them they've impregnated you with. Because my father definitely impregnated me with parts of him. Some parts I thank him for. His charisma, his ability to con people, that he was like a snake oil salesman, that he never had a steady job, although he worked very hard, that he was a gambler. I'm not interested in gambling, but you could consider my whole life, and certainly my entire career, a big gamble. So you have to understand who the enemy is and why, what their motives are, before you can truly become free of taking up the whip from them. So in the end, I thank my father, because it forced me to be stronger. It forced me in the end to be more compassionate, to be more passionate, and to be more obsessive. And I think these are all very good qualities for a creative woman. How to Survive in the 21st Century by Lydia Lunch. First of all, disbelieve everything you read, you see on television. Read everything, watch everything, and then form your own theories. Make sure that in some part of every day, you live at least for 5 minutes 5 minutes to 5 hours in total silence with only your own thoughts and nothing polluting you. Make sure you understand what pleasure really is. No matter how kinky, weird, perverse pleasure appears in your brain pan, find a way to really bring it out. Even if it's only through fantasy, try to find someone who can at least enact your most unusual fantasy, at least. Immediately now, once. Understand what really turns you on and question it, understand it, and then go for it with complete gusto. Make yourself happy, make yourself satisfied, and don't count on anyone else to do it, because unless you are happy or satisfied, no one else can do that for you. The more satisfied you are individually, the more satisfaction you will have. I can assure you that.
Thank you.
That's the hardest question of all, you bitch. How to bake a cake? How to not
great.
give birth?
Thank you.
Let's go have a hug where it's cool.
Yeah, let's get out.
Thank you.